At 1 in the morning, my son collapsed on my porch, his face covered in bruises, cuts, and scrapes. "Mom," he said. Then his knees buckled and he slammed against my front door with a crash that woke the hydrangeas. He'd received those blows when his wife hit him. "Because of her lover," he whispered in the ambulance, the words stuck in his mouth like cotton wool. By dawn, I learned she wasn't just cheating on him, she was planning to sell his house using a forged power of attorney, and the deal had already been done. Quick pause, subscribe, hit like, and drop your city in the comments so I can say hi next time. They admitted him at St. David's North with a mild concussion and bruised ribs. I sat by his bed, the fluorescent light making his beard look grayer than it is. I'm 66, and I have lived in Round Rock, Texas, long enough to know the difference between a man who fell and a man who was struck. I crocheted the edges of the blanket with my fingers to keep from marching down to my daughter-in-law's apartment over in Cedar Park and saying something I'd regret. The ER nurse clipped a hospital bracelet on him, and I asked for 2 copies of the discharge instructions, the way I learned to do after caring for my mother. I date stamp everything. I keep a receipt tin shaped like a peach pie on top of my fridge, and inside is a neat row of envelopes labeled with a Sharpie. House, car, utilities, medical, choir, MISC. I came home with the discharge packet filed in medical, Evan. Even though he is 37 and longer than I can remember, I've been told not to interfere. I brewed him peppermint tea in my old chipped enamel kettle and set out the pill organizer I keep for myself, Sunday through Saturday, morning and night, with the lids that make a tidy click. "Tell me," I said. The tea breathed mint into my kitchen, and beyond the back window, the hydrangeas were fat with midnight dew. "She hit me with her phone," he said, one hand flat on the table as if it were a dock and he a listing boat. "I found messages with a man named Mark. They were talking about paperwork and keys. She told me I was being paranoid, got angry, then you can see." "Paperwork?" I said. "She said we're doing a small refinance for the kitchen. I never signed anything, Mama." When he fell asleep on the couch with an ice pack tucked against his ribs, I went to my front door to scrub the blood. I keep a cast iron skillet on the stove and a bucket under the sink. Cleaning your floor at 2 in the morning is a strange kind of prayer. The smell of pine sol took me back to the summers I taught vacation Bible school, where things made sense. While I knelt, a thought rose up, my doorbell camera. I wiped my hands and opened the app. At 12:13 a.m., the video shows my son swaying up the path, the lights from the neighbor's flood lamp cutting him into slices. He lifts a hand with a shaking thumb, presses the doorbell, and then that hollow thud against the glass. But at 8:42 p.m., earlier, the camera caught a different scene. Headlights, a car idling across the street. My daughter-in-law Sarah, in a black hoodie, a duffel bag slung like she was going to the gym, and a tall man with a ball cap marked Pecan Creek Homebuyers. They didn't look up. They didn't see the camera's little blue eye. They loaded something into the trunk? A lockbox? They drove off fast. Why would Sarah leave, then come back to hit Evan? Why the duffel bag? The next morning, I tiptoed to the kitchen like every cupboard door was a tripwire. I made eggs in my cast iron skillet, the smoke barely whispering, and woke Evan with gentle lies about how it was nearly noon. He tried to sit up like a soldier, but winced. I set a plate in his lap and said I'd run to his place to grab some clothes. "Take my spare key," he said, and I slid it onto my keyring between the grocery store discount card and an old penguin charm my choir friend Dot gave me. It's 13 minutes from my house to their subdivision, Deer Creek, if you hit the lights right. Saturday morning quiet, except for sprinklers. I parked under a live oak that had a fresh stump where a limb had been taken off. No permit in sight, and the cut looked angry. On the door, there was a paper folded into plastic and taped. Notice of violation, HOA Architectural Committee. $250 fine for unauthorized tree trimming. Signature line, owner Evan Pierce. But I know my son's signature. He curls the P in Pierce like a question mark. This was a blunt, flat P. Under it, a line labeled Spouse Approval, Sarah Pierce. The signature was hers, neat and even. I slid the paper into my tote. Inside, their place smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the kind of candle that's trying too hard to be a bakery. The kitchen island was clear except for a pink folder labeled closing packet. My heart thumped in sync with the kitchen clock. Tick, clack, tick. I opened the folder with my thumb. Just a peek, I told myself. Just enough to know what road she had placed us on. On top was a statutory durable power of attorney with my son's name as principal and Sarah as agent, dated the previous day, notarized by Carla Mendez, Travis County, X 2027. My son's signature was a slanted Evan with that gentle P curl, but the line was oddly spaced, like the letters were tracing a memory. Behind it, an owner's authorization to release information for Thunderbolt Credit Union, giving Sarah access to statements and balances. Then a loan estimate from a mortgage company I'd never heard of. Blue Bonnet Title was listed as the closing agent. Loan purpose? HELOC, $148,000. There was a calendar printout with a circle around Wednesday, 3 days from now. Closing, 2 p.m., Bluebonnet, North Lamar. Bring keys. I took photos with my phone. My hands shook so hard the first few were blurry. Then I got them. I slid everything back the way I'd found it and looked at the time, 9:47 a.m. On the fridge, a magnetic clip held a business card. Pecan Creek Home Buyers, Mark Corrigan. We buy homes fast, any condition. On the back, a note in Sarah's looping hand. Mark, keys 2s, lockbox code 1947. I called the number on the loan estimate first, using that steady, soft voice I taught myself at the elementary school where I was a secretary for 25 years. "Hi, this is Linda Pierce, calling on behalf of my son, Evan," I said. "He's asked me to check on a file you might have." The woman put me on hold, then came back careful. "We can't disclose details without authorization," she said. I gave her the tracking number on the estimate. "We do have a scheduled closing on Wednesday at 2 with an agent using a power of attorney." My stomach dropped. I asked her to note on the file that the principal contests and requests a pause. "Ma'am," she said, "we'd need something in writing from the principal." I left the house and sat in my car where the sun made a little green square on my dash. I texted Evan a summary, then drove to the Thunderbolt Credit Union branch on Burnett. The fraud officer, a woman with sensible shoes and tired eyes, took us into a glass cube. Evan, pale but upright, slid his ID across the table. "We didn't authorize any HELOC," he said. She pulled up his account and frowned. "An application was initiated online last week," she said, "with e-signatures." She turned the monitor so we could see the IP address. "Do you recognize this?" she asked. It was an Austin IP, yes, but geolocation pointed to a coffee shop near 45th and Lamar. "Can we put a freeze?" I asked. "We can place a fraud alert and require in-person verification for any disbursement," she said. She printed a form. Evan signed, his hand steadying. We drove straight to the Williamson County Clerk's office, where the records counter smells like paper and hand sanitizer. A clerk with a sunflower scarf pulled up the day's filings. "Nothing recorded yet on Mr. Pierce's parcel," she said, "but e-filing is fast. You can set a grantor-grantee alert." She took my email. I took a breath that felt like I'd been underwater. "What is Sarah doing?" Evan asked, voice thin. He still had that ice pack ache in his ribs. We drove home past the Round Rock Water Tower, past the bar where we held trivia nights when his father was alive, and I realized the map of my life had shifted a few degrees while I slept. My choir friend Dot texted to remind me about rehearsal, and for a second I pictured myself in the alto row like always, sheet music clipped with a clothespin, the director's old metronome clicking. I wrote back, "Family emergency, pray." Dot's husband Jim used to be a notary. "Do you know a Carla Mendez?" I asked her. "Travis County." 10 minutes later, Dot sent a number and a warning. "I think she does a lot of mobile notarizations at coffee shops." I stepped onto my porch and called. "This is Carla," a woman answered over a whoosh that sounded like espresso steaming. "Yes, I notarized a power of attorney yesterday," she said after I gave her the names. "Where?" I asked. "The Starbucks on North Lamar," she said. "Around 6:30, maybe?" The woman was the agent. She showed me the POA, and I notarized her signature. On a lender document. I did not witness the principal sign the POA. That was already signed when presented to me. I just notarized her signature on lender forms that referenced it. She had a driver's license and a marriage certificate copy. "Do you have your journal entry?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "I can email a copy of the redacted line." When the email came, I printed it and slotted it behind a tab in a binder labeled Wednesday 2 p.m. The journal showed 6:42 p.m., Sarah Pierce, ID verified, location, Starbucks, purpose, acknowledgement of signature on authorization to release information and closing instructions. Notes, POA presented, notary did not witness principal. I circled location and time. At 6:50 p.m. that same evening, my doorbell camera caught Evan dropping off a spare ladder he'd borrowed from me. The timestamp glowed. He was in Round Rock at 6:50 p.m., not at a coffee shop signing anything. That doesn't prove he didn't sign something earlier in the day, I told myself, but it gave me a seam to pull. I knocked on Sarah's sister's door on Sunday afternoon because I knew she sometimes watches their dog. "Is Sarah here?" I asked. "Haven't seen her since Friday," her sister said, excusing her messy living room with a sweep of her hand. "She's been with her friend." She didn't say lover. She didn't need to. On a side table was a half-open envelope from Bluebonnet Title. "Mind if I said, and she shrugged like my curiosity was a tennis ball I could have. Inside was a standard wire fraud advisory reminding them to verify instructions. A sticky note stuck to it said, "Bring keys. Mark will meet you at lobby with lockbox." I recorded my next call to Sarah. Texas is a one-party consent state, and I am one party when it's my phone and my child's name on the line. I did not threaten. I did not yell. I asked. "We are refinancing," she said brightly. "The kitchen needs new countertops." Evan didn't agree, I said. "It's our home," she snapped, and then, softer, a tone she used when she wanted me to back down. "You worry too much, Linda. Just bake your little pies and let us handle it." "We need to slow this down," I said. "Then tell Evan to stop wasting time and sign the disclosure he's ignoring," she said, and hung up. On Monday morning, my email pinged, a grantor alert. Bluebonnet Title had submitted a deed of trust for e-filing at 9:08 a.m., not yet accepted. I emailed the title company's general inbox with the subject line, "Urgent, contested power of attorney, principal incapacitated from assault by agent." Not my best subject line, but true enough to rattle. I attached the hospital discharge summary, the notary journal excerpt, and a letter Evan signed before breakfast stating he does not grant POA and requests halt to any closing using his name. I CC'd the fraud officer at Thunderbolt. Then I drove because I learned a long time ago that email is a whisper in a hurricane, but people will look you in the eye. Bluebonnet Title sits in a strip of offices off North Lamar, all glass and ficus plants. I wore my choir outfit because it makes me feel like my spine knows what it's doing. Black skirt, blue cardigan, sensible shoes. I asked for the escrow officer named on the loan estimate. "I'm not at liberty to discuss," she said after I introduced myself. "This is my son's home," I said. "I'm not fishing. I am warning you. You're about to help someone steal it." I slid the folder across the desk with the swiftness of a teacher confiscating a note. Hospital timestamps, doorbell camera stills, the notary journal entry, Evan's signed letter. The officer's face went through 3 stations: annoyance, calculation, worry. "I need to call our underwriter," she said. "Please wait here, Miss Pierce." I sat, hands tight on my tote straps like reins, and prayed the kind of short, specific prayer my grandmother taught me. "Lord, give truth to the people who can act."
At home, Evan lay on my couch watching daytime court shows with the volume low. I made chicken and rice in the cast iron skillet. He ate slow and quiet. In the afternoon, the HOA called. "This is Lorraine from Deer Creek," a voice said, polished as a sales pitch. "We've got a few unresolved violations, tree trimming without approval, and a lockbox placed without architectural consent." "A lockbox?" I asked. "Yes, someone placed a realtor-style lockbox on your son's front door yesterday." I closed my eyes. Who authorized that? I asked. The form we received was signed by Evan, she said. Please email me a copy, I said. And when it landed in my inbox 3 minutes later, my stomach turned a neat cartwheel. The signature looked like a photocopy of his name pasted on, dusty gray and missing the P curl. The date next to it said Sunday, but on Sunday morning, Evan was in my kitchen learning how to set timers on the pill organizer. I printed the form and added it to the folder. My table was a paper meadow. HOA fines, bank forms, title emails, the business card with the lockbox code. I labeled each tab in my binder with blue stickers, like a teacher preparing a lesson plan. Bank, fraud, title, warning, HOA, forgery, notary, journal, doorbell, timestamps, medical, ER. I nearly put in a tab for hydrangea, worry, because my plants always show it first. On Tuesday morning, the escrow officer called. We've paused the file, she said. Our underwriter flagged the POA for additional verification. We'll need the principal to appear in person for identity confirmation before any disbursement. Also, our notary vendor is reviewing the journal entry. I exhaled for the first time in 48 hours. Thank you, I said. Then my phone dinged again, a text from an unknown number. It was a screenshot of my message to the title office. Nosy old ladies make bad witnesses, it read. No name, just that. I swallowed my fear and took a picture of the text on another phone because evidence of a threat looks better if you can show how it arrived. That afternoon, my neighbor, Alicia, brought over a casserole and sat at my table like she'd been deputized. I have a Ring camera too, she said, tapping her phone. It caught someone messing with your son's lockbox Saturday night. She turned the phone and there he was, a tall man in a ball cap marked Pecan Creek Homebuyers. He kneels at the knob, enters a code, opens the door. Timestamp, 9:19 p.m. He walks out with a different lockbox than the one my camera saw earlier. He smiles like he's stacking pennies, not stealing a life. I can email this to you, Alicia said. Yes, I said, please. And I added a tab to my binder called Neighbor Video. By Tuesday evening, Sarah finally replied to Evan's messages. You're embarrassing me, she wrote. Mark says you don't understand wholesaling. It's legal. We'll all be better off. Stop letting your mom meddle. Wholesaling. I Googled it. That practice where someone locks up a property and sells the contract for a fee. Legal sometimes, yes, when everyone consents and signs, like surgery is legal when you consent and sign, not when the patient is unconscious and someone else slips a pen in his hand. Stay till the end, I will show the truth. I set 2 alarms for Wednesday, one for church because even in the middle of a storm you keep your routines, and one for 1:15 p.m. to make sure we arrived at Bluebonnet Title early. I laid out my clothes on a chair, a habit left from years of school mornings, and I slid my binder under the seat of the car so I wouldn't leave it behind. At dawn, I watered the hydrangeas and watched the water bead on the leaves like a neighbor's eyes filling when she finally tells you the thing you suspected. I coiled the hose and whispered to my late husband, Paul, "If you're listening, Paul, please give me my steady hands." We stopped at Thunderbolt Credit Union so Evan could get a new debit card. His old one had been skimmed, probably at a gas station in Hutto last month, and now seemed as good as any time. The clerk gave us a fraud pamphlet no one reads, and a pen with a click that sounded like a hinge securing. Evan held his ribs and said, "I wish Dad were here," and I squeezed his shoulder so he felt the memory anyway. At 1:28 p.m., we pulled into the strip of offices. I parked where our license plate would be in view of their front window, so there would be no confusion that we'd come. Inside, the air smelled like printer warm, the ficus plants green and glossy. The escrow officer met us at the door like we were relatives in a bad play. She said, "We're in conference too. The other parties are on their way." Evan's face drained. He whispered, "I don't want to see her." I said, "You don't have to," looking the officer in the eye. "Separate rooms, please." She nodded, and I knew then she had a mother too.
In Conference 2, we sat across from a little dish of mint lifesavers. I placed my binder on the table and folded my hands. At 1:51 p.m., the officer came back. "Our underwriter has reviewed your materials," she said. "We requested that the agent provide the original POA and bring the principal for in-person ID. She refused. The other party arrived with a third person who introduced himself as a contractor. I have informed them that without the principal present and verified, we will not proceed."
"Thank you," I said, and then a knock came at the glass. Soft, like someone testing a window. The officer held up a hand, stepped out, and closed the door behind her. Through the fishbowl tint of the glass, I could see Sarah across the hall, her hair pulled back hard, a man at her elbow with that Pecan Creek cap. He was taller than I'd guessed. He leaned in like a coach whispering a plan. She bit her lip, looked unsure, then angry. I took out my little composition notebook I keep in my purse, for quilting measurements, choir notes, and now this, and wrote times like a court reporter. The officer returned with a security guard, a soft-spoken woman who introduced herself as Kendra. "We're going to have you wait here until they leave," the officer said. "The other party has been told the file is on hold." My phone buzzed. A voicemail from an unknown number. I pressed play, put it on speaker so Evan could hear. It was Sarah, not realizing her message had begun recording before she started. "Can we switch title companies? Mark, you said we could switch if they get nosy." Then a man's voice, muffled but clear enough. "We can switch, babe, but we need the POA to fly." And with his mommy showing up with binders, the message cut off. I saved it before my phone could think better. We waited until the glass showed only ficus reflections and left by the back door, Kendra walking us like we were dignitaries. In the parking lot, the sky looked like a quilt backing, plain and honest. I put the car in gear and said, "We're not done." Back home, I set my binder on the kitchen table and slid a new tab into place. Title, Conference. I added the voicemail transcript. Then I made spaghetti sauce in the cast iron, the simple kind that perfumes the house and makes even a hard day sit down for a minute. Evan ate 2 bowls, and when he put his dish in the sink, his hands didn't shake. At 8 p.m., my email chimed. It was the notary, Carla. "I've reviewed my journal and the copy the agent provided of the POA. The notarial certificate on the POA appears to be from a different notary I do not know. The agent admitted the principal was not present at my signing. She asked if we could backfill something. I refused. I am willing to provide a statement to the title company and, if needed, to law enforcement." I read her words twice. I printed them and slid them into the tab called Notary, Statement. Then I dialed the non-emergency number for the Williamson County Sheriff and asked how one would file the report about an attempted fraud involving real property. The deputy said to come by in the morning. Before bed, I walked out to the porch. The hydrangeas held the last of the daylight like secrets. I thought of my daughter-in-law asleep somewhere that wasn't her home, of a man with a ball cap and a lockbox code, of my son breathing deeper now on my couch. I have a small brass dish on the side table by the front window. In it, I drop little found things: buttons, a foreign coin, a marble, notes with verses. I added a folded slip. Wednesday, 2 p.m. We showed up. We didn't bend. The next morning would bring the county clerk, the sheriff, and a board meeting where an HOA president would wish she'd never brushed me off. But that night, I slid the bolt on my door and set my phone on the charger like a sentry laying down his head. I woke up at 5:30 the next morning because that's when women my age wake up when there's a battle to fight. I put on coffee and lined up my pill organizer, popped my calcium and my blood pressure pill, and then packed a Tupperware of leftover spaghetti for lunch. Evan came down the hall with that morning after stiffness people wear after being hit. He sat and let me fuss with his collar, because sometimes you let your mother do that, even if you're 37 and even if you swear you wouldn't.
At the sheriff's office, the lobby chairs were the color of bandages. Deputy Alvarez took us into a small room and clicked a pen. I laid out my binder like a dealer lays down a winning hand. Hospital discharge, doorbell timestamps, neighbor's ring video, the notary's journal entry and statement, the HOA lockbox form with the photocopied signature, the title company's email pausing the file, the voicemail with Sarah and Mark discussing switching title companies. He wrote notes, page after page. "This is more organized than most lawyers," he said, and I smiled a little. "So is my spice rack," I said. He nodded. "We can open a case for attempted fraud and domestic assault." he said. The district attorney will decide charges. The notary statement helps, the ring footage helps. We went next to the Williamson County clerk. The clerk I'd spoken with before, Sunflower Scarf, recognized me. We'll place a fraud alert on the parcel, she said, tapping the keyboard like a pianist. Any deed filed will be flagged for review. She printed a copy of the parcel card and circled our names. You're not the first to come in with the binder this month, she said softly. But yours, she touched the tabs, yours might actually stop it. I put my hand over hers, that polite, brief touch women use when we want to tell each other we understand. We stopped by Evan's house to check the lock. Someone had removed the lockbox overnight. The HOA violation notice was gone. In its place, another note in a plastic sleeve. Final notice. Fines escalating. I took a photo before carefully slipping the paper into my tote. I was starting to love that tote like a partner in crime, except I was the one stopping the crime. At home, I sent a certified letter to Bluebonnet Title summarizing our position because certified mail receipts still open doors in a world drunk on email. I also filed a complaint with the Texas Attorney General's Consumer Division. I didn't expect a miracle, but I wanted the dots connected in the official places. In the afternoon, Dot came over with banana bread and a question. Do you want me at the HOA board meeting? Yes. And wear the earrings that make you feel invincible. The Deer Creek HOA met in the community room behind the pool, where the air always smells faintly of chlorine and cupcakes from last week's birthday party. Lorraine, the woman who had called me about fines, sat at the center with a stack of papers and a pen that clicked. Next item, homeowner at 11 Juniper, lockbox without approval, tree trimming, outstanding fines. She looked up and found my eyes with professional detachment. Miss Pierce, are you the homeowner? I'm his mother. He's present but recovering from an assault. We have evidence that the lockbox and trimming were authorized with a forged signature. The room made that polite hum of discomfort. I slid a smaller version of my binder across the plastic table. The HOA form with the photocopied signature, the neighbor's video, the lockbox code written in Sarah's hand, the title paperwork, and a letter from the sheriff's office confirming an open investigation into fraud. The treasurer leaned in. Lorraine, we can't enforce fines based on a forged form. Lorraine clicked her pen twice, a sign she'd lost balance. We'll need to review, she said. Review away, I said, but gently. In the meantime, can we have a hold on penalties? The treasurer nodded toward Lorraine, who pressed her lips together and said, Motion to hold. It passed with 4 hands. I squeezed Dot's knee under the table. After the meeting, a man in a polo with the HOA logo approached me. He said, My wife follows a guy on Instagram who flips houses. He posted a story Sunday night of a lockbox at your son's address. He tagged it, another deal in the bag. She screenshotted it because he's always bragging. He showed me the photo. The lockbox, my son's address half blurred, the caption with a geotag, Cedar Park, 9:21 p.m. Sunday. The username, @PeckandCreekMark. The profile picture matched the cap. Could she email that to me? I asked. He said, already sent, tapping his phone.
I printed the screenshot and put it in the tab Social, Instagram. It felt obscene to hold someone's brag in my hands when that brag was my son's life. I kept thinking of how many women my age have stood between a child and a danger they didn't see coming. How many of us have learned to project calm while calculating. The church choir met that night, and I sent a message to the director. I'll be back Sunday. Save my spot on alto. He sent back a praying hands emoji. I wanted a real hand to hold. Thursday morning, the escrow officer emailed to say the other party had attempted to move the file to another title company. They requested we transfer documents, she wrote, but our underwriter notified the other title agents of the fraud concern. If you receive any suspicious contacts, please let us know. I had the small, childish urge to bake cookies for her. Evan's phone pinged with a message from Sarah. You're making a fool of yourself, she wrote. Merck says your mom's binder is just busy work. The deal is legal. Evan typed and erased 3 times before he settled on, You hit me. I have a concussion. She didn't respond to that. Instead, an email landed in my account from Bluebonnet Title, CC'd to Sarah. Per instructions from the principal, the file is closed. No disbursements will be made. I printed it and tucked it into the tab called Title, Closed. At 10, I drove to a strip mall near 620 where a coffee shop sits between a nail salon and a barber. I had asked Sarah to meet me to pick up some of her mail that accidentally came to my house. That was true. I had moved 2 pieces from her pile to mine by mistake. I did not tell her that my neighbor Alicia would be at the next table with her laptop open and that my phone would be recording in my purse. I ordered a latte and sat where I could see the door. She walked in looking like someone on her way to a casting call for In Control, the caped coat, the neat ponytail. She sat and slid her sunglasses onto her head like a crown. "You wanted to see me," she said. I handed her the 2 pieces of mail and a small turquoise bag with a peppermint foot lotion I'd bought her last Christmas. "I want you to stop," I said, mild as tea. "Stop the HELOC, stop the lockboxes, stop lying to my son." She laughed, a little brittle. "It's business, Linda. You wouldn't understand wholesaling. We found buyers who will pay the HELOC off, do the repairs, and cut us a fee. Mark knows what he's doing." "He's the one you were texting Saturday?" I asked. She looked down, missed up. "Stay out of our marriage," she said. "He's helping us." "He hit you?" I asked. She blinked like I'd thrown salt. "No," she said. "I hit him, okay? Because he was snooping through my phone like a jealous—" She stopped. "Anything else?" she said, brittle again. "Yes," I said. "I know about Wednesday at 2. Her eyes narrowed. "There'll be another 2, she said. She stood, grabbed the bag, and left. Alicia lifted her eyes from her laptop. We didn't grin, we didn't high-five. We breathed the way you do after you balance on a ladder and step down safe. I went home and transcribed the recording, adding it to Audio Cafe. It's one thing to suspect. It's another to have the sentence, "I hit him." I sent the recording to Deputy Alvarez. He wrote back, "This helps." In the evening, he called. "We've issued a protective order barring the wife from the property. We have enough for a misdemeanor assault charge and we're consulting with the DA on attempted property fraud. If the man with her is involved, that's separate." I told Evan and he sat down like someone had removed a backpack he didn't know he was wearing. He texted Sarah, "I need space. Don't come to the house." She replied with 3 words, "You'll be sorry." Keep watching. There will be justice. Friday morning, I baked a pan of cinnamon rolls to keep my hands from shaking. My house smelled like Christmas. I lined my binder tabs with little post-its carrying micronotes. Page 3, ER time, IGGO tag 9:21 p.m., notary says no principal present. My choir sheet music sat on the piano, patient as a cat. The hydrangeas out front were drinking up the shade. At 10, Deputy Alvarez called. "We executed a warrant at the property this morning," he said. "We recovered the lockbox and some documents in the trash, including what appears to be a printed template for signatures. The man, Mark Corrigan, showed up while we were there. He claimed he was a contractor hired to stabilize the property. He had no work order or contract. We have him on body cam admitting he placed the lockbox. He's being held on suspicion of criminal trespass and forgery pending review." The phone went light in my hand. I leaned against the counter and looked at the cast iron skillet like it had been a lucky charm all along.
An hour later, Bluebonnet Title emailed again. "For your records, original lender canceled application due to suspected fraud. Underwriter issued an alert to all local title agents." Attached was a letter on thick paper with the watermark that said, in the fancy language companies use when they know they almost tripped, that they would not close any file using a POA for Evan Pierce without in-person verification. I slid the letter into the tab, Title, Underwriter. Saturday, the HOA treasurer emailed an apology. "We have rescinded all fines," she wrote. "The lockbox authorization was fraudulent. We will be revising our process to require in-person ID for such requests." I printed it, not because I needed more paper, but because I like the weight of victories in my hands. Sunday morning, I went back to choir. The director grinned when I walked in. Dot handed me a thermos of peppermint tea. I sang alto, like my voice had been waiting to carry a thing heavier than notes. After church, the pastor hugged me and said he'd been praying. I didn't say, "Me too," because that was visible in the binder I carried everywhere like a purse. Monday, Evan filed for divorce.
The attorney was a woman who looked like she'd cut her own hair with kitchen shears during college and never regretted it. She said, "We'll ask for exclusive use of the home and a temporary restraining order," she said. "Given the circumstances, the court will likely grant it." She took pictures of our evidence. She said, "You've done our work for us." I said, "No," and I smiled. "I've done a mother's work." The notary, Carla, gave a formal statement to an investigator. She looked tired when we met at the courthouse hall. She said, "Some people think notarization is just a stamp. I never thought I'd be dragged into something like this." I said, "Thank you for standing up, even when it got uncomfortable." She nodded. We both know about doing hard things, while smiling so the world doesn't flinch. 2 weeks later, the district attorney charged Mark Corrigan with forgery of a financial instrument and criminal trespass, and Sarah with misdemeanor assault and attempted fraud by deception, a lesser charge connected to the forged HOA forms. Charges aren't convictions, I know, but they are gates that keep wolves from walking through the yard as if they own it. Sarah took a plea on the assault charge, community service, and a class on anger management. The attempted fraud piece would drag a bit, like a chair on carpet, but the important thing, the house was safe, the e-lock dead, and my son sleeping in his own bed without lockboxes. Meanwhile, the title insurer opened a claim that turned into a kind of audit. They found that a notary in Bexar County, 2 counties south, had a stamp used on POA documents that looked eerily similar to the one presented by Sarah. That notary's journal didn't list Evan's name. The insurer passed that to the Secretary of State's office. I tried not to crow, but I did lay out a nicer tablecloth for dinner that night. We held a neighborhood meeting in the community room where the cupcakes had been. I brought a 3-page handout, How to Not Get Your House Stolen, even by someone you know. It had bullet points like, set up property alert with the county clerk. Don't sign anything you don't understand. If your doorbell camera catches a lockbox magically appearing, call it in. We did not use words like scam in neon. We used calm words, because sometimes calm words carry the sharpest edges. Women my age took copies and folded them into their purses. One said she'd put it under her fridge magnet next to her grandkids. That felt like a tiny miracle. Mark's Instagram quieted. The last post before it went dark was a photograph of a car interior with the caption, "Taking a break, haters." The comment section did what comment sections do. I didn't read the rest. I baked banana bread and delivered it to Dot because victory makes more sense when you share it with someone who watched you build the binder 1 tab at a time. Sarah sent 2 more texts to Evan, both breathless. "We could have made $25,000. You ruined it." Then, "You'll never meet anyone as ambitious." Evan wrote nothing back. He met with his therapist on Wednesday and with his attorney on Friday. The temporary order gave him exclusive use of the home. She moved in with her sister. The court clerk gave us a date for the final hearing. My binder had a new tab, Divorce, Orders. In the pocket of my choir folder, I saved one small photo, my doorbell cam still of Evan at 12:13 a.m., head bent, hand raised for the bell. I kept it because it reminded me that the reason I did any of this wasn't to win against Sarah, or to post about justice, or to teach a seminar at the community room on how to notarize a dream. I did it because my child came to my door like a boy again, and I opened it.
Don't click away. He'll get what's coming. 2 months later, we sat in a courtroom that smelled like old books and HVAC. The judge wore glasses on a chain and looked like someone's grandmother, which is to say, capable of both mercy and steel. Sarah's attorney spoke in soft bites about confusion and marital property and how everyone was trying to act in the best interest of the home. Our attorney, kitchen shears hair, stood and laid out our binder with a restraint that made me love her. The best interest of the home, she said, does not include forged HOA forms, unauthorized lockboxes, an attempted HELOC without the principal's consent, and a recorded admission of assault. The judge asked 3 questions, none complicated. Who has been living in the home since the temporary orders? Has the alleged agent provided any valid POA registered with the county? Has law enforcement closed its investigation? The answers were Evan, no, and ongoing. The judge granted the divorce,
awarded the home to Evan and ordered that any marital interest claimed by Sarah be resolved through a buyout of $0, given the attempted fraud and the protective order. She also granted a long-term protective order. The gavel sound was smaller than I expected. Victory often sounds like a dull knock, then quiet. Mark's case took longer, but he eventually pled to forgery and received probation, with restitution to cover the title company's investigative costs. He's barred from any real estate activity during probation. I heard that from Deputy Alvarez in the grocery line, of all places, between the cantaloupes and a rack of tabloids. "You did good," he said. I told him it wasn't just me. I had a good binder, I said. He laughed. We celebrated with brisket at our favorite place, the one with sticky tables and a sign that says cash only. Evan carved his meat with care, his face more relaxed than I'd seen in months. "I'm signing up for a woodworking class," he said, and I clinked my iced tea against his. "That's something solid," I said. At home, I watered the hydrangeas until the soil turned that rich, nearly black brown. I wiped the counters with a dishcloth that used to be a shirt of his when he was 8. If you're a mother, you know about repurposing. Cloth, strength, rage. The HOA invited me to join the architectural committee. I said yes, because sometimes the best revenge is holding the clipboard yourself. Our first act was updating the rules to require in-person verification for any lockbox or tree trimming requests. We added a sentence about no investor lockboxes without documented listing agreements. We wrote in plain English. A neighbor baked cupcakes, and we ate them in the room that smelled like chlorine and paperwork. My church asked me to speak to the seniors group about scams. I said yes and wore my blue cardigan. "Put your name on your home alert system," I said. "Keep a receipt tin. Label things. It's not nosy to ask questions. It's called stewardship." They nodded. Some took notes. Afterward, a woman with silver hair pressed my hand and said, "My daughter is in trouble. Can I call you?" I gave her my number and promised to answer. One evening, months later, I found the turquoise foot lotion bag tucked into a box in the garage. I started to toss it, and then stopped. I put it on a shelf in the laundry room where I keep clothespins and old buttons. Not as a trophy, as a reminder that sometimes people throw your love back at you like a cheap lotion, and you go get it later and put it where it belongs, among useful things, not precious ones. You move on. I still keep my binder, now with a soft patina at the edges. When I slide it out of the cupboard to add a new document, Evan's final decree, the HOA's new policy, the title insurer's thank you letter, I run my hand across the cover like you pet a well-loved book. The hydrangeas bloomed bigger this year. I like to think they're showing off. If you're a woman between 50 and 80 and you've listened to all of this, I want you to know you are not meddling when you insist on clarity. You're being wise. Keep a paper trail. Make friends with your county clerk. Learn to love your cast iron skillet and your printer with equal devotion. Put your phone on record if you need to protect a conversation. Obey the law, but don't apologize for documenting the truth. And teach your sons and daughters to come to your door if they need you, at 1 a.m. or any time at all. As for me, I went back to choir and sang the alto harmony like a ribbon twined with melody. I quilted a lap blanket in blue and green squares and gave it to Evan at Thanksgiving. He wrapped it around his shoulders and said, "Thanks, Mama." The house is quiet now, in a good way. The hydrangeas nod in the breeze, the receipt tin hums with order, the binder sleeps under the counter like a guard dog with its eyes half closed. This was my experience. I share it for awareness and, I hope, a little encouragement.
My grandmother told me this story. Thanks for watching this video. Bye bye!